Crown Table was not the kind of restaurant where people came to simply eat. It was the kind of place where men in tailored suits signed deals over medium-rare filet and ware. Women in diamonds laughed at things that were not funny. Emma Collins had worked there for 2 years, and she had learned to move through its polished world like a ghost. Efficient and invisible, her brown hair pinned back. Her white uniform pressed sharp every single shift. She was 24 years old, and she had never once called in sick. Her manager, a round-faced man named Douglas, who smelled of cologne and stress, appreciated that about her, even if he never said it out loud. Emma did not need him to say it. She needed the hours, and she needed the tips, and she needed every single dollar that would go toward her mother's treatment at St. Vincent's Medical Center on the other side of the city. On a Thursday evening in late October, Emma was running 2 tables at once when the hostess seated a group of 4 men near the window overlooking Fifth Avenue. She grabbed her notepad and walked over with the kind of practiced calm that had taken her a long time to build. The men were deep in conversation and barely looked up when she arrived. She gave them a moment, poured water around the table without being asked, and waited with her pen ready. 3 of the 4 men ordered quickly and went straight back to talking. The 4th man looked up at her for the first time, and Emma felt something shift in the air, though she could not have explained what or why. He was tall, even sitting down, with dark hair that was slightly longer than the business cut worn by his companions. His eyes were a shade of gray that reminded Emma of the sky just before a winter storm rolls in. Not cold exactly, but carrying the suggestion of something powerful held just barely in check. He wore a navy suit without a tie, and there was a quality about him that Emma recognized immediately. As a man who had stopped needing to prove himself a long time ago, he ordered without looking at the menu. Black coffee, a simple steak, and he asked Emma which vegetables were fresh tonight. Not as a test, but with what seemed like genuine curiosity. She told him honestly, and he thanked her by name before she had even told him what it was. She glanced down and saw her name tag. Of course, his name was Harrison Blake. She did not know that yet. She only knew his table number and his order, and the way his companions deferred to him in ways she had learned to notice. After 2 years of reading rooms, the table sat for 2 hours. Emma kept their waters full and their plates cleared, and she answered their occasional questions with the same direct, unhurried honesty she brought to everything. When the bill came, one of the other men reached for it immediately, but Harrison placed his hand on the folder. First without any drama, and simply said he had it. The other man laughed and backed off like he had never planned otherwise. Emma brought the card reader over and processed the payment. When the receipt printed, she folded it neatly inside the folder and set it at the corner of the table as she always did. She was halfway across the room when Douglas appeared at her elbow with an expression she had never seen on his face before, something between amazement and nerves. "Collins," he said quietly, "that man left you $600? Emma stopped walking. She turned slowly. "On what bill?" "On a $400 bill," Douglas said, still looking like he needed to sit down. Emma looked back toward the window table. The group was gathering their jackets. Harrison Blake was standing now, and he was already looking at her. He did not smile exactly. He simply held her gaze for one steady moment, then turned and walked out with his companions. Emma stared at the table for a long moment, and then she went back to work. She found the business card tucked inside the bill folder when she cleared the table. It was a heavy cream card with clean black lettering. Harrison Blake. Blake Capital Group. Nothing else. No personal note. She turned it over in her fingers twice, and then she slid it into the bus bin with the crumpled napkins. She told Diane about it later. After their shift, while they sat on upturned milk crates in the alley behind the kitchen, sharing a bag of chips and a single bottle of sparkling water, Diane had rescued from a half-eaten catering tray. $600, Diane said, eyes wide. Emma, $600 on a $400 bill. I know what $600 is, Diane. And you threw away his card. I did. Diane stared at her. Why? Emma pulled her coat tighter and looked up at the narrow strip of night sky visible between the buildings. Because rich men who leave $600 tips on a regular bill are not doing it to be generous. They are doing it because they want something. And I do not have anything to give anybody right now." Diane was quiet for a moment. "That is either really wise or really sad." "Probably both," Emma said, and ate another chip. She thought about it on the subway ride home. Not about the money, but about the moment he looked at her across the room. She had been looked at before. She had been flattered and approached, and once uncomfortably. Followed to the corner of her block by a man from table 12 who thought persistence was romantic. But this had been different. Harrison Blake had looked at her the way people look at something that surprises them. Not something they want to take, but something they did not expect to find. She pushed the thought away. She had her mother's prescription to pick up in the morning and a double shift on Saturday and a bill from the medical center sitting on her kitchen counter that she had been turning face down every evening. For a week, because looking at it straight on made her feel like the floor was dropping. A way she did not have space in her life for. Surprises, Harrison. Blake came back the following evening. He sat alone this time, in the same section, at the same table by the window. Emma saw him the moment she came out of the kitchen, and she felt her step falter for just one breath before she straightened and walked over. "Good evening," she said, and her voice came out exactly as steady as she needed it to be. "Good evening." "Emma," he said, and there was something in the way he said her name. Not familiarly, not like they knew each other, but carefully, like he was aware that names mattered. She took his order. He asked again which vegetables were fresh. She told him again. He thanked her again. At the end of the meal, he did not leave another extraordinary tip. He left exactly 20%, and he left a note on a page from a small leather notebook folded once. She opened it after he was gone. It said, "I came back because I wanted to apologize. If the tip last night felt like anything other than gratitude, you are exceptional at what you do. That is all I meant by it." Emma stood in the middle of the dining room holding that small folded paper and felt something move in her chest that she had kept very still for a very long time. She did not throw the note away. She folded it back along its crease and she slid it into the pocket of her apron. And she finished her shift and she went home. And she sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and wondered, for the first time in years, what it would feel like to let someone in. Gerald Owens had worked for Harrison Blake for 11 years, and he had seen his employer do many things that surprised him. He had watched Harrison walk away from a $2 billion deal because the other party lied about one small detail in the paperwork. He had watched him donate an entire building to a children's hospital and ask for his name to be kept off the plaque. He had watched him sit alone in his penthouse office at midnight, staring at nothing in particular, which Gerald privately believed was the loneliest thing he had ever witnessed in his life, but he had never watched. Harrison Blake asked him to find out the name of a waitress before. "Her name is Emma Collins," Gerald said, standing in the doorway of Harrison's office the morning after the second visit to the Crown Table. "She has worked at the restaurant for 2 years. Before that, she worked 2 jobs simultaneously while finishing a business administration degree at City College. Her mother, Carol Collins, is currently receiving treatment at St. Vincent's for a cardiac condition. Emma appears to be the sole person managing those costs." Harrison was standing at the window with his back to Gerald and his hands in his pockets. He did not turn around right away. "I did not ask you to investigate her," he said. "You asked me to find her name," Gerald said carefully. "I find it difficult to locate a name without finding context around it. It is a personal flaw." Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is she managing the costs?" "From what I can tell, yes." Harrison turned from the window then, and Gerald noticed something in his face that he had not seen in a long time. Not the sharp, focused expression he wore in boardrooms. Something quieter than that. Something that looked almost like concern for another human being, which Gerald recognized as significant, because Harrison Blake had spent the better part of a decade building walls specifically designed to prevent that particular expression from forming. "That is all," Harrison said. "Thank you, Gerald." Gerald nodded and left. And he allowed himself one small private thought in the elevator on the way down, which was that something was finally beginning to shift in that office, and he hoped very much that it would not be wasted. Harrison showed up at the crown table 4 more times over the following 2 weeks. He always sat in Emma's section. He always ordered simply. He always stayed for exactly as long as felt natural, and never 1 minute longer, as if he was aware that presence could become pressure if a person was not careful about it. He talked to Emma the way she imagined people talk to each other when they were not trying to impress or acquire or perform. He asked her what she was reading. He asked her what she thought about things. He listened to her answers without interrupting. Emma began to understand that Harrison Blake is the kind of man who made you feel like the room had gotten quieter and warmer at the same time. And she began to understand also that this was a dangerous quality in a person. She told Diane everything. The way she told Diane everything, over chips and sparkling water in the alley after shifts, and Diane listened with her chin in her hands and her eyes going wider with each installment. "He just talks to you," Diane said on the 3rd evening. He just talks to me," Emma confirmed, "like a normal person. Like a completely normal person who happens to own half of Midtown Manhattan." Diane was quiet for a moment. "Emma, I need you to understand something. Men like that do not just talk to women like us. They have reasons." "I know," Emma said. "And you are still letting him come back." Emma looked at the narrow strip of sky above the alley. The stars were not visible through the city light, but she looked anyway. "He has not asked me for anything, Diane. Not once. He just shows up, and he is kind, and then he leaves." Diane studied her friend's face in the low light for a long moment. "You like him?" Emma did not answer right away. Then she said, "I think I might. And that scares me more than anything he could possibly want from me." The invitation came on a Thursday morning, not to the restaurant, to Emma's phone, in a text from a number she had finally saved under the name Harrison, which had taken her 4 days to decide to do. The message was simple and short. "There is a charity gala this Saturday evening for the Children's Medical Foundation. I would like it very much if you would come as my guest. Not my date. My guest. There is a difference, and I want you to know I understand it. No pressure of any kind." Emma read the message standing in the kitchen of the apartment she shared with Diane, still in her pajamas. Holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, she typed back, "What is the difference?" His response came within a minute. "A date implies something is owed. A guest implies you are simply welcome." Emma put her coffee down. She looked at the window. She looked at the bill from St. Vincent's that she had finally moved to the refrigerator door because turning it face down on the counter had stopped working as a coping strategy. She typed, "I will need a dress." His response? "Gerald will arrange whatever you need. Just tell him your preferences. He will not make it uncomfortable." Gerald did not make it uncomfortable. He called her that afternoon with the quiet efficiency of a man who had handled complicated logistics for over a decade, and he simply asked her what color she felt most like herself in, and what kind of shoes she could actually walk in, and whether she preferred her hair up or down at formal events. Emma told him she had never been to a formal event, and Gerald said, without any condescension at all, that in that case, they would choose something that felt like the best version of her regular self. She would be completely fine. The dress was deep blue. Simple and cut, elegant without trying too hard. Emma looked at herself in Diane's full-length mirror on Saturday evening and felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, genuinely beautiful. "I cannot believe this is your life right now," Diane said from the doorway, holding her phone up to take a photo. "It is not my life," Emma said. "It is one evening." "Emma Collins," Diane said firmly. "Let it be something." The gala was held in a ballroom in Midtown that Emma had walked past hundreds of times without ever imagining she would be inside it. Harrison was waiting near the entrance when Gerald brought her in, and when he saw her, he went very still for just a moment before crossing the room. He was wearing a dark suit, and he looked exactly like himself, which Emma was beginning to understand was one of the things she respected most about him. "You look wonderful," he said simply, and he meant it in a way that did not make her feel examined. It made her feel seen. The evening moved in a way Emma had not expected. Harrison stayed close to her, but did not crowd her. He introduced her to people without prefacing her with her job title or their connection. He just said her name, Emma Collins, and let her be a person in the room rather than a detail in a story. Vivian Hartwell arrived an hour into the evening. Emma did not know who she was at first, only noticed a tall woman in a red dress crossing the room toward them with the kind of deliberate grace that is learned rather than natural. "Harrison," Vivian said warmly, leaning to kiss his cheek. Then her eyes moved to Emma with a smile that had nothing warm in it at all. "And who is this?" Emma Collins, Harrison said. Vivian tilted her head slightly. "Are you in finance, Emma?" "I am a waitress," Emma said. And she said it the way she said everything, without apology and without performance. Vivian laughed softly. "How charming." "Harrison, you always did appreciate a project." The room did not go quiet. Nobody else even noticed. But Emma felt the word land, and she kept her face still and her chin level, and she did not look at Harrison for rescue. Harrison looked at Vivian with an expression Emma had not seen on him before. It was not angry. It was simply finished. "Emma is not a project," he said quietly. "She is the most genuine person in this room, and I would appreciate it if you spoke to her accordingly." Vivian held his gaze for one beat, then smiled differently, a real smile this time, something almost like respect, and excused herself and moved on. Emma kept looking straight ahead until Vivian was gone, and then she exhaled slowly. "You did not have to do that," she said. "I wanted to," Harrison said, later. Near midnight, Harrison brought her to the rooftop of the building. The city stretched in every direction, glittering and enormous and indifferent in the way that only New York City could be. They stood at the railing, and Emma tipped her face up toward the sky, and for the first time in a very long time she felt something inside her chest unclench like a fist slowly opening. "I need to tell you something," Harrison said. Emma looked at him. "I have spent 10 years not letting anyone close. I was good at it. I told myself it was practical, and I mostly believed that." He looked out at the city. "And then you threw my card in the trash, and I could not stop thinking about you." Emma laughed softly before she could help it. "You knew about that?" Douglas told Gerald. "Gerald told me." The corner of his mouth lifted. "I was not offended. I was interested." She turned to face him fully. The wind moved across the rooftop, and the city hummed far below them, and Emma Collins, who had spent 2 years being invisible in a room full of people, felt entirely visible now, and found that she did not want to run from it. "I need to tell you something too," she said. "I've never been close to anyone. Not in any way. I have never let myself. I was always too busy surviving to think about it, and then after a while it just became part of who I was, keeping distance, keeping walls up." Harrison turned to look at her, and there was nothing in his expression but attention. Complete, unhurried attention. "I am not telling you this to frighten you away," Emma continued. "I am telling you because you were honest with me, and you deserve the same thing back." Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, not romantically, just carefully, like something worth handling with care. "Emma," he said, "that is not a thing to apologize for. That is a thing to protect." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean that someone who has kept herself whole and honest and unbroken through everything you have been through is someone worth making a promise to." Her breath caught. "What kind of promise?" "The kind I have never made before," he said. "That I will not rush you. I will not pressure you. I will not treat you like something to be collected or conquered. I will simply be here as honestly as I know how to be. For as long as you want me to be." Looked at him for a long moment, and the city went on, burning below them, and she thought about her mother and her bills and her apron and the note she had never thrown away, and the fact that she had never once in her 24 years felt like someone was standing beside her rather than in front of her or behind her. And she felt something open in her heart that had been closed for a very long time. "Okay," she said quietly. He said back. And they stood there together on that rooftop with the whole city beneath them, and neither of them said anything else for a long time, and it was the most peaceful, Emma. Collins had felt in years. Patrick? Novak had a smile that was very easy to trust and a mind that was very difficult to read, which was how he had survived 40 years in New York real estate without ever being the most powerful man in the room, but also without ever being the most threatened one. He existed in the middle, space between ambition and caution, and he had become very skilled at finding the soft places in other people's lives and pressing on them gently until something useful came loose. He found Emma Collins on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the gala, while she was on her break outside the Crown Table, eating a sandwich on the front steps because the alley smelled like something had gone wrong in the kitchen. "Emma Collins," he said, as if he knew her, which he did not. He sat down beside her without being invited, and he had the kind of easy manner that made that feel almost acceptable. "I am Patrick Novak. I believe you know a colleague of mine." Emma looked at him. "I do not know anyone named Novak." "No, but you know Harrison Blake." He smiled pleasantly. "And Harrison knows me, though I suspect he would describe our relationship in terms that are less generous than colleague. We are competitors. Let us say." Emma set her sandwich down slowly and looked at this man with the careful attention that 2 years of reading strangers in a dining room had given her. "Want," she said. Patrick appreciated directness. He said so. Then he explained in the same pleasant conversational tone that Harrison Blake was in the process of closing a land acquisition deal that Patrick had been working toward for 3 years, that the key information Harrison held was a set of zoning documents that had not yet been filed publicly, and that if Emma could get him a look at those documents before the filing date, he would personally ensure that Carol Collins received the finest private cardiac care available in the state of New York. Fully covered. For as long as she needed it, Emma looked at him for a long time after he finished speaking. "You had someone look into my mother," she said. "I looked into you," Patrick said gently. "Your mother came up naturally, and you thought that would work. I think most people have a price, Emma, especially people who are tired." Emma picked up her sandwich. She took a bite. She chewed thoughtfully and looked at the street, and Patrick waited, reading what he thought was consideration in her silence. "I will not do that," Emma said. Patrick studied her. "Your mother's treatment. It's my responsibility," Emma said. "Not yours and not Harrison's and not something I am willing to sell for." She looked at Patrick Novak with brown eyes that were completely steady. "I do not know exactly who you are or how you found me, but I am going to tell Harrison about this conversation today, and I am going to suggest that he speak with whoever handles things like this, whether that is a lawyer or someone else. You should probably know that before you try this with anyone else." Patrick looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and left without another word. Emma sat on the steps for another minute, finishing her sandwich. Her hands were not shaking, which surprised her slightly. Then she took out her phone and called Harrison. He picked up on the second ring. He always picked up when she called. She told him everything. She did not soften it or build to it slowly. She simply described the conversation from beginning to end, including the part about her mother. And when she finished, there was a silence on the line that felt different from his usual pauses. "Emma," he said finally, and his voice was quiet in a way she had not heard before. "I am fine," she said. "I want to be clear that I am completely fine." "I know you are," he said. "I know that. I just thought you needed to know."
"I did."
"Thank you." Another pause. "I am going to take care of this. Not because you cannot handle it, because it should not have been brought to you at all." "Harrison." "Yes." "My mother's care," Emma said carefully. "I do not want you to." "I know," he said. "I was not going to offer. I respect you too much for that." She closed her eyes briefly. "Okay. I will call you tonight," he said. "After Gerald and I deal with Novak." What Gerald and Harrison did with Patrick Novak was precise and legal and resulted in Patrick losing the bid entirely on grounds that held up in any room where it was examined. Gerald described the process to Emma later simply as a door being closed. Firmly, and she appreciated that he did not feel the need to be more dramatic about it than that. But something happened in Harrison. After the phone call that Emma did not see and only learned about later, from Gerald, who told her because he believed she had a right to? No. Harrison had sat in his office for 2 hours after hanging up the phone, and he had done something that Gerald had not seen him do in 11 years of working together. He had sat very still and thought about what his life had looked like before Emma Collins was in it and what it would look like if anything happened to change that. And he had felt, for the first time in a long time, genuinely afraid, not of losing a deal or a quarter or a market position, afraid of losing a person. Gerald had knocked on the office door after the 2 hours, and Harrison had looked up and said, "I need to fix something, Gerald." Gerald had said, "Yes." "I suspected you might." Emma was at home on a Friday evening, sitting cross-legged on her bed with her laptop open and her mother's latest test results from St. Vincent's on the screen, which were better than the previous month and which she had read 4 times already, just to make the number settle in her chest. When there was a knock at her apartment door, Diane was working a late shift. Emma was not expecting anyone. She opened the door, and Harrison Blake was standing in the hallway of her ordinary building in a regular jacket and no tie. And he was not carrying flowers or a gift or anything at all except himself. And he had an expression on his face that Emma had only seen once before on the rooftop at the gala, which was the expression of a man who had run out of walls to stand behind. "I should have been clearer sooner," he said. "About what this is. About what you are to me." Emma leaned against the doorframe. "You do not have to stand in a hallway to do that."
No.
"I drove here from the office, and I sat in the car for 20 minutes deciding how to say this properly, and I could not figure out a proper way, so I decided to just say it, then say it." Harrison looked at her. The hallway light was not flattering, and the building smelled like someone on the 3rd floor was cooking onions, and it was in every way the opposite of a rooftop at a charity gala, and he did not appear to notice any of that at all. "It have been building things my whole life," he said. "Buildings and companies and portfolios, and I have been very good at it, and it has never once made me feel the way I feel when you answer the phone, when I call, or when I walk into a room and you look up. I did not plan for this. I'm not sure I even knew it was possible for me." He paused. "I want to build something with you, Emma. Not for the board or the investors or anyone who has an opinion about who I am supposed to be with. Just because you are the person I want beside me." Emma Collins looked at this man, standing in her hallway with absolutely nothing to offer except his honest self, and she thought about her father, who left and never came back, and about all the years she had spent making herself need nothing from anyone, and about how exhausting and lonely that had been, and about how Harrison Blake had, from the very first evening, treated her name like it mattered.
"You should come inside," she said. "It is not a penthouse." "I did not come here for the penthouse," he said. She stepped back and let him in, and Diane's jacket was on the couch, and the medical bill was still on the refrigerator door, and the apartment was exactly as small and real as it had always been, and Harrison sat down on the couch and looked around at all of it with an expression that had nothing in it but contentment. Emma sat beside him, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and the city went on outside the window the way it always did, enormous and indifferent and full of 10,000 other stories happening all at once. "I am scared," Emma said honestly. "So am I," Harrison said. "That does not usually make things easier." "No," he agreed. "But I think it makes them real." She looked at him. He looked at her. And Emma Collins, who had spent her whole life being careful and closed and quietly strong all by herself, leaned her head against the shoulder of Harrison Blake and felt, for the first time in her 24 years, that she did not have to carry everything alone. Outside, New York City went on glittering and rushing and never stopping for anyone, and inside a small apartment above it all, something began that both of them already understood would change everything about the lives they had been living, and neither of them was afraid of that anymore.